How's it going, guys? It's your boy Kanji and welcome back to the channel. On today's video, we're going to be switching up the vibes a little bit, and instead of chatting about some FPL like we usually do, I wanted to chat about some football. The English Premier League season is only 8 days away. I genuinely cannot wait, and I'm sure you must be as excited as I am. So what I usually do every season is I like to predict the standings of the Premier League teams from the first team all the way to the 20th team. So we're going to be going through my predictions for the 2024-2025 Premier League season. Now, the transfer window is still open, and these predictions can be a little bit early, and I could be completely off with some of them, but so you'll have to caveat it given the fact that today's only August 9th. So just keep that in mind. But without further ado, I'd like to jump right into my predictions. By the way, this is going to be my first time producing a video in this type of format, so if you have any feedback, let me know in the comment section down below of ways that I can try to improve. Also, if you disagree or agree with some of my hot takes, let me know. I can't wait to banter with you guys in the comment section. So without further ado, let's jump right into it. The 20th place team is going to be Leicester. Now, this is going to be a Cinderella story that I wish I could buy into. Whenever I look at Leicester, I get nostalgic vibes based on like the Harvey Barnes, James Maddison, Jamie Vardy teams that used to be there in the past. But when I'm looking at their squad, they kind of got destroyed after they got promoted. I mean, they lost their coach. They're going to have a new system. They lost their main talismanic midfielder in Dewsbury Hall. They lost Ndidi as well. And then they have Jamie Vardy as their striker, as well as Patson Daka. Now, Vardy's a great player. He's been a journeyman. He's been with Leicester for years, and I would love to cheer him on, but he's definitely past his prime now, and I think he just picks up so many injuries all the time. Patson Daka does not fill me with any confidence at all, so I just feel like when I'm looking at the quality within this team, I think they do have some interesting players like Mavididi and Fatau that could make a difference in the Premier League and can definitely win them some games. So they have some game changers within their squad, but I just look at their overall squad as a whole, and I just don't think they have enough quality to stay up. So for me, it's just an absolute no-brainer that I think Leicester are definitely going to be the most likely team to be going down, and the bookmakers also tend to agree with that. Moving on to the team that I think will finish in 19th place, and that's going to be Ipswich. Now, Ipswich is the real Cinderella story, if you ask me. I feel like I'm going to be watching their games and cheering for them to win them. But when I'm looking at the squad, I'm kind of a little bit confused how they made it to the Premier League. I do feel like they're kind of 1 year ahead of schedule. I'm looking at the manager and Kieran McKenna, and he's done wonders with this squad over the past 2 years, securing back-to-back promotions, but at this point, with the players that he's brought, I feel like he's already maximized their potential. I wonder how stubborn the manager will be with the tactics that he's used, because I wonder if the system that they use in the Championship will translate well into the Premier League. They're definitely not going to be having enough possession as they were in the Championship, and so I'm not sure if the manager will be able to tweak his system enough in order to help Ipswich survive. And because of the lack of trust that I have within the manager, as well as the lack of Premier League players that I'm seeing within the squad, I'm just not sure I'll be able to back them to finish in the non-relegation spots. And I just think in general, it's hard for me to back the newly promoted teams. I just think there's a massive gap between teams like Nottingham Forest and Wolves, who have just been in the Premier League for 4 or 5 seasons, that have secured lots more of matchday revenue, TV broadcasting revenue, that are able to just go out into the market and spend so much more money and bring in quality players in the January transfer window if they're ever in danger. So I just feel like this is the type of team that I wish I could recommend, that I could say that they're going to be finishing in 17th or 16th, but I'm just not sure if they're going to be doing that this time. I do feel like when or if they get relegated and then they come back, that will be the time where I can genuinely consider putting them in the mid-table position. But for now, I think I'm just not sure if they're ready. And because of that, I'm going to be putting them in the relegation spot of 19th. Man, the viewers are not going to like this, but unfortunately, I've got to continue with the running theme of newly promoted teams to get relegated. Now, when I was looking at the Championship table last year, I really thought that I would see Southampton at the top of it, but they didn't actually even finish first or second. They finished fourth. They qualified through the Premier League, through the playoffs. But when I'm looking at the squad that they have, I feel like it's actually much stronger than what Leicester as well as Ipswich have at this point. So I'm looking at the players that they've added, somebody like Sugawara, as well as Ben Brereton Diaz, who I think will be absolute game changers for them. Sugawara is very solid defensively, has good attacking upside. Somebody like Ben Brereton Diaz was one of the standout players of the teams that did get relegated, and I really rate that signing, especially coming in onto that right foot from the left wing. I think he'll definitely pick up at least 6 or 7 goals in the Premier League, maybe even get double digits. The question is really going to be about Adam Armstrong. Will he be able to translate his form in the Championship into the Premier League? And the jury's still out. He hasn't been able to do that in the past. I do feel like they're still missing a key midfielder. If they added somebody into that squad in the midfield position, then I think I'd be more likely to recommend them to stay up. But for now, I'm just not sure. However, I do want to mention that having somebody like Adam Lallana, as well as Kyle Walker-Peters and Bazunu, who have experience in the Premier League, whenever Southampton are going through some tougher times, I think having good players like them in the dressing room is just good to have around because they've been there, they've done that, they have the experience, so they'll be able to keep moods high and positive even through some of the tougher times whenever you're going through relegation battles. So my instinct is still telling me that Southampton is the type of team that I could recommend to stay in 15th or 14th, but for now, until I see them sign a good quality midfielder that I rate, I just still think their squad is not good enough and they're not ready. But they're teetering on the verge of being able to survive. So let's see what they do in the rest of the transfer market. But for now, I'm going to be recommending them to actually finish in 18th. Unfortunately, the team that I think will barely survive by the skin of their teeth is going to be Wolverhampton Wanderers. Wolves have had a very poor offseason because when I'm looking at the moves that have happened in the transfer window, it's been horrendous. Their spine of the team has kind of just been destroyed. They've lost their center back, their captain, and Kilman, and they haven't gone out there and replaced them as of yet. In addition, they've also lost their biggest X factor in Pedro Neto. I'd really want to emphasize how important Pedro Neto is to their team. Before he got injured, he was actually leading the Premier League in terms of assists. Like, he's actually that good. But the issue with him is that he always misses half the season. But the quality of player that you bring in won't be able to make the impact that Pedro Neto was able to have when he was playing games. And that's the issue, because when we're looking at the XG that Wolves had, they were in the bottom 5 teams last year, and that's including the relegated teams. So that just shows you how poor Wolves were in terms of expected goals. So I think I worry for them, and I'm not sure if they'll be able to score enough goals. However, they have kept hold of Hwang Hee-Chen, and they've got Cunha, and I think those two players will be very, very important for them to survive. And they also have a baller in Aït-Nouri at the left back spot, so I really rate them, and that's why I think I'm not going to be putting them to get relegated, because I think they have enough creativity coming from that left-hand side that they should be able to score enough goals and to stay in the Premier League. But I'm not confident, and it wouldn't surprise me at all to see them get relegated. So let's see what happens. I'm hoping that they can go out there in the transfer market and sign a center back replacement, as well as sign a good right wing that has experience in the Premier League, and then I'll be more confident and maybe push them towards the mid-table. But for now, I just think they're going to be fighting relegation, and it's going to be a very long season for them. The team that I'm going to be predicting to finish in 16th is going to have a very solid season. I think they'll actually have a better season than they did last year. In fact, I'm not even sure if they'll be in the relegation battle when it comes to the last 6 or 7 games. I think they'll be okay, and that's going to be Nottingham Forest. The reason that I'm very comfortable with that is that whenever I see teams go to the City Ground, it's never an easy game. In fact, Nottingham Forest were actually in the top 6 in terms of expected goals conceded, meaning that they always have a very solid defense. The issue with them is that they just don't create enough goals because they were in the bottom 6 for XG last year. So you can tell what the issue is. They need to create more chances. However, they just conceded way too many goals given the amount of XG that they were conceding. So the issue for them was that they were the worst team in terms of conceding goals from set pieces, leaving them in 20th place in that regard. So I think they wanted to go out there and address that issue in the transfer market, and I feel like they have. They went out there and signed a new center back, they signed a new goalie, so I do think that they should be able to improve and perform better in line with their data, maybe keep a couple more clean sheets. And I think they have good quality players to give them enough goals to stay alive. And I think you've got players like Gibbs White in the midfield holding everything together. You've got Alenga on the right, Callum Hudson-Odoi on the left, and you've got somebody like Chris Wood, and Awoniyi kind of missed half the year, and he's definitely better than Chris Wood in my opinion. So I think they have enough quality to stay up, and I don't think they'll be in the relegation battle for too much longer, but I do feel like this is the type of year that Nottingham Forest need to kick on and become the type of team that's more so associated with the mid-table rather than the relegation battle, because you can only keep knocking on this door so many times until eventually you're going to fall through and actually get relegated. So I'm going to be cheering on Nottingham Forest. The data backs them up. I'm backing them up as well, and I think they don't even need to add anybody to their squad. They have enough quality. They just need to figure out the issue with set pieces, and I think they're going to be completely fine. So I'm just going to be predicting a nice safe finish in 16th for Nottingham Forest. Let's move on to the next bracket of teams, and I think there are 4 teams that really stand out that aren't really going to be pushing to fight in the top half, but also shouldn't be in the relegation conversation either, and that's going to be Bournemouth, Brentford, Everton, and Fulham. Unfortunately, I do feel like Bournemouth is going to be the bottom tier in this bracket because they have lost their talismanic striker in Dominic Solanke, who's going to be making the move to Tottenham Hotspur. I think that's a wonderful signing for Spurs, but the issue is that it's hard to find a striker that can pick up 20 goals in the Premier League, and that's what Dominic Solanke did last year, finishing on 19. How often is it that we see a striker leave from one club and that club tries to replace that striker, but it just takes the new striker enough time to adjust to the physicality and the speed of the Premier League, and they're just not at the same level as the former striker was. So it wouldn't surprise me to see Bournemouth come down. Whenever I'm looking at their XG data, they're mid-table. When I look at their expected goals conceded data, they're mid-table, and I really rate the manager as well as the system that they use there. But by losing your talismanic striker and Dom, that's everything that you were building through or two, and my instincts are just telling me that there is a down spell that's going to come, and it really just depends on the quality of the player that comes in to replace him and how quickly he can adjust to the Premier League. So for now, I just think it's fair that I think Bournemouth are going to be in the bottom rung within this bracket. The next club is going to be Brentford, who I'm predicting to finish in 14th. Now, this is the type of club that I wouldn't be surprised that actually finished in the top half, and it wouldn't surprise me either if they finish closer to the relegation places. So I wanted to just strategically put them in 14th because it wouldn't surprise me to see a large range of outcomes. The issue with Brentford is that it's the Ivan Toney situation, because I know that he has returned to Brentford, but he doesn't really want to be there. And this is going to be the last year in his contract. It wouldn't surprise me to see him actually leave in the January transfer window, and I wonder if he's lost the trust from the ownership as well as the coaches. Probably a top 5 striker in the league, if I'm honest, but it's just his attitude, and I just feel like he may not be a 90-minute man under Thomas Frank anymore. So I wonder if him getting less minutes will have a negative impact on the team or even the chemistry or the system. I think there are a lot of negative ripple effects that can happen with the Toney uncertainty. We have seen him return to training. I think he will be part of the team. I don't think that he will be leaving, but if he does, that would probably make me even more pessimistic, and that's why I think I'm going to be putting them in this position. But I just feel like they have enough quality players in general. I do trust Wissa. I really like Mbumo. When I'm looking at the guy that they signed in Igor Thiago, I think he's a really solid player when I watched him in preseason, but I think he's out for a couple months now, so I think they really need Toney. The issue with Brentford was just going to be their defense, but they addressed that in the transfer market where they signed Lacroix from Wolfsburg. Ben Mee is back from his injuries. They've got Pinnock, who's kind of injury prone, but he's fit now. The issue with them is they also lost Rico Henry last year, and I think he's coming back to full fitness. So I think they're in a better position this year than they were last year. So I think they'll have a better season in terms of their finishing position. I also want to mention that I'm a big fan of Thomas Frank. The system that he uses is absolutely incredible, where they don't really look to create that many chances. They just look to create 3 or 4 high XG chances. Whether that's against lower level opposition or higher level opposition, they can play at the level of their opponent because they'll change their system from 3-5-2 to 3-4-3. So I really rate the manager and the system that they use. And for me, I think they'll just be comfortable in this bracket, finishing in 14th place. The team that I'm going to be expecting to finish in 13th is going to be Fulham. Now, Craven Cottage is never an easy place for Liverpool to visit, so I just don't want to be recommending Fulham to be finishing too high or too low within the Premier League table, especially with the signing of somebody like Emile Smith-Rowe. I think he could be an absolute game changer, an X factor. I feel like this could be Emile Smith-Rowe's breakout season. With somebody like Willian leaving the squad, Emile Smith-Rowe will easily fill into his shoes. The problem with Fulham is going to be the departure of Paulinho. He was one of the best center defensive mids in world football. I genuinely really rated him. Whenever he didn't play, you could really notice a difference within Fulham's team. So I just feel like defensively, they'll get worse. They were the 13th best team in terms of expected goals conceded, and it wouldn't surprise me to see them fall towards 15th or 16th. And they were also the 12th best team in terms of XG, and I think that'll kind of say the same. So I don't really want to be recommending for them to improve, but I don't want to be recommending on them to fall too much either, because I think we had a breakout season last year in Muniz. I think this could be his coming out party, really. Like, he broke out last year, he scored a hatful of goals, but I think this year could be where he stamps his authority on the league and picks up 20 goals in the Premier League if he gets enough minutes in game time. There are rumors of somebody like Andreas potentially leaving the club as well, so that would be another reason to not recommend Fulham too highly. So I think this is the type of team where I think they'll finish in mid-table, not going to be upper mid-table, not going to be in the bottom half, just solid 13th ranked finish with nothing to worry about, a solid club within the Premier League that you don't really want to be visiting. The team that I have finishing in 12th place is going to be Everton. Now, when I was looking at their data from last year, they were actually 10th for expected goals. In fact, they created 57 expected goals. But guess how many goals they did score? 40. That's unbelievable. That's a massive amount of underperformance. I don't think I've ever seen that whenever I've been looking at stats over the past 5 years. So there has to be some sort of positive regression to the mean for players like Dominic Calvert-Lewin and Beto as the strikers. And if the system that Sean Dyche is employing is creating enough chances, we already know that Sean Dyche teams are very solid defensively. In fact, I think they kept the second most clean sheets in the league last year, and they were in the top 6 in terms of expected goals conceded. So defensively, they're not really any question marks over Everton unless they lose their key player in Jared Branthwaite. He's going to be one of the key things to think about. If he leaves Everton, they could regress because I think Branthwaite is the type of young profile that most big teams should be targeting. He's young, he's fast, he's quick, he's tall, he has all the attributes that you'd want. In fact, he even added a couple goals to his tally last year, so I rate Branthwaite. So if he stays, I think this season for Everton will be absolutely plain sailing. Even if they go out into the transfer market and don't sign a better striker than DCL, I still think they'll be fine because their defense is just so much better than a lot of the other teams in the league. So for me, I think Everton will just have a smooth, plain sailing season. Hopefully they don't have a points deduction this time, and I'm predicting them to finish comfortably in 12th place. Moving into the next tier of Premier League teams, I do feel like there are 3 teams that enter into this tier where I think they're not going to be in mid-table, but they're not really going to be fighting in the European places. However, it wouldn't surprise me if one of them ended up finishing in like 7th or 6th if they had a very solid season. And that's going to be for 3 clubs specifically in Crystal Palace, Brighton, and West Ham. And I think for 3 completely different reasons, I think they should be fitting between 9th to 11th. The team that I'm going to be predicting to finish in 11th is going to be Brighton. Now, last year they finished 9th offensively and 7th defensively. So they have very strong expected data. And that was going to be under their former coach in Roberto De Zerbi. I really rated him, but it did feel like his time had come and gone. It felt like he had kind of been super sour with the way that things had ended, and he kind of gave up. It felt like his mind was elsewhere. The only downside with Brighton is that they did lose one of their key players in Pascal Gross, but they have so much depth that I think they'll be able to make up for it. And when I'm looking at the squad, it is absolutely stacked with talent. Looking at the left wingers, they've got Mitoma, they've got a Dinger that can play there. They've signed somebody like Minte who can play on the left. He can also play on the right. They've got March on the right. They've got João Pedro through the middle. They have Ferguson through the middle as well. He's still under 22 years old with bags of talent. They have so many good quality players, even underrated players like Dunk and Estupiñán who are top 10 players in those positions in the Premier League. So I just feel like Brighton is a type of team that can bounce back this year. Last year, they had to play some of their squad in Europe as well as in the Premier League, but now Europe is off the table. And I think they're going to have to understand the new system under the new manager. But there was just so many injuries last year as well. You know, Mitoma was out for the season. March was out for the season. João Pedro was in and out of the lineup constantly. Ferguson just missed almost the entire year. So as long as their lineup is healthy, it wouldn't surprise me to see them even go to the bigger clubs and get results against them. So I'm very confident and very optimistic that Brighton can have a bounce back season, especially given how deep their squad is. The team that I am going to be predicting to finish in the top half is going to be West Ham. Now, the Hammers usually have inconsistent seasons because some of their players are just not consistently picking up 15 goals a year. They'll have like a 20 goal season and then like a 10 goal season. Looking at you, Jared Bowen, eyes on you to see if you can repeat what you did last year to show me that you're quality. But when I'm looking at the issues with West Ham, they had glaring holes in the striker position as well as in the defender spots. And that's exactly what they filled in the transfer market. They brought Nicholas Füllkrug, who's proven in the Bundesliga, picking up double-digit goals last year, and he also played in the Champions League as well as the Euros, so he's a solid player. And then they picked up Somerville, who is going to be a great depth signing in the winger positions. I'm not sure they needed it, but it's still great to have another winger in case you get any injuries to players like Kudus or Bowen. And then you address your major need, which would be in center back, where you sign Max Kilman from Wolves, and you sign Todibo from Ligue 1, who's probably a younger and better version than Kurt Zouma. So I think they've really addressed their issues within the squad, and that's why I think they will improve. In fact, when I looked at their expected goal difference data, which looks at their expected goals, subtracting their expected goal conceded, and they were very poor amongst the bottom 7 teams in the league. But I think they've absolutely smashed their signings that I think I can just back them to really improve this year and actually end up the season finishing in 10th place. The team that I am going to be predicting to finish in 9th place is going to be Crystal Palace. They have become one of my darling teams from last year. They ended the season on fire, and I think the system that they use under the new manager Glasner is incredible to watch. They play with two wingbacks with Munoz and Mitchell keeping the space, and it allowed players like Elise, Eze, and Mateta to cook. They were on fire to end the season. In fact, Mateta's purple patch has continued for the past 4 or 5 months. He just continued to score goals in the Olympics as well. So he's going to be coming back to the Premier League with the house on fire. So I can't wait to watch him. He's definitely somebody on my watch list. The issue with them is that they are in talks to lose Margehi defensively. However, under Glasner, they were the fourth best defense in terms of expected goals conceded, and Margehi only played one game out of 15 with Glasner. So I don't even think that Gehi leaving the club will impact them, but just keep in mind that he's one of the best center backs in the league. And I also want to say that they're going to be losing one of their best young talents in Michael Elise, who went out to join Harry Kane at Bayern. However, they have replaced him, and they brought in a creative player like Kamada, and they brought in a pacey player with Ismail Assar. So I feel like those two players will be able to cover for the impact that Elise had. So I'm looking at this team in general. I think the additions that they have been solid, and I just think it's going to be on Eze to continue to step up and become the player that we all think he can be. And the responsibility of this club is going to be on Eze's shoulders. So I'm honestly very excited for what they're going to be doing. The system that they use is incredible. One of my favorite teams to watch. I'm very optimistic for Crystal Palace, and I just think the data backs them up. They're mid-table for XG, and under the new coach, they were in the top 5 for defensively. So I'm expecting a very solid finish, and it wouldn't surprise me to see them in 7th or 6th place come the end of the season. We are moving on to the top 8 teams remaining in the Premier League predictions table, and I think there are 2 separate brackets for these 8 teams. There are 3 teams that are going to be the Premier League contenders, teams that I think are going to be fighting to actually win the Premier League. And then there are going to be 5 teams that are Premier League pretenders, where they act like they're trying to win the Premier League, but they're really just fighting for European places, and there's no shame in that. And I think the 3 teams that are going to be fighting for the Premier League title is going to be Arsenal, Liverpool, and Man City. And I think the 5 teams that are going to be the Premier League pretenders and top 4 contenders in being Manchester United, Aston Villa, Newcastle, Spurs, and Chelsea. And I believe that of these teams, Manchester United will finish in 8th place. As the transfer window has been coming to a close, I've been very disappointed with the transactions that Manchester United have completed. I mean, think about it. They signed a young guy in a center back position. He goes out in preseason and he's injured for like a month. Do Man United really feel that they're going to sign like a 20-year-old kid that's going to come in and improve their defense right away? He's obviously going to be taking at least 6 or 7 months to adjust to the speed and physicality of the Premier League and grow into his body. So I don't know if that's really a good signing for the here and now, but it's definitely going to be a good signing over the next 4 or 5 seasons. Then I felt like their other major issue would have been a center defensive mid, because I do feel like Casemiro has lost his legs, but they still haven't signed one yet. They did also go out into the market and signed a new striker in Xerxes, and he should provide some competition between him and Højlund. So I think that's a great signing, but they didn't sign another center back that I really feel like will be on the same timeline as players like Rashford and Bruno, and they didn't sign a CDM that I really feel like they can rely on, because I think Casemiro's past his best. So I think there are issues at Manchester United, and unless they solve those issues in the transfer market, there's no way I can be backing them to finish above any of the other teams in this tier. And when we look at the underlying data, they had the worst expected goal difference of any of the teams in this table, comfortably finishing in the negatives among the bottom 7 teams in terms of expected goal difference. So the teams in this tier are really a level above Manchester United, if we're being completely honest. So there's no way I can put them any higher than this. In fact, I feel like I'm being generous. And the issue is, it's kind of with the coach. Like, I don't actually know like what his system is. Like, I watched Man United all of last year, and I'm like, what are they trying to do? I actually don't even know. They picked up 2 trophies in 2 seasons, so they just decided to keep him from an extra season. But if they perform poorly, it wouldn't surprise me at all. I genuinely don't know what Man United are trying to do with their identity. I think they have Rashford, Garnacho, Bruno. They have good quality players. They even have Sancho coming back into the squad. But I just feel like I don't know what they're trying to do with this team. And now they've picked up injuries to their striker in Højlund, who's going to be missing a couple games. And Casemiro, I'm just not a fan. So for me, bro, I'm just really low on Man United. And I think most fans that are neutral will also agree with this. The team that I'm predicting to finish in 7th also has a United in its name, and that's going to be Newcastle United. So I honestly could have predicted them to finish higher than seventh, but I just feel like I want to be a little bit more cautious because last year they had to play in Europe as well as in the Premier League, and their squad was stretched. They ended up picking up injuries to a lot of the squad. Sven Botman was injured, as well as their backup in Jamal Lascelles. They ended up getting an injury to Nick Pope, so their defense should improve because Nick Pope has arrived, and they're looking to sign a replacement center back in Margehi, who was England's best player at the Euros, in my opinion. So I think defensively they will improve. In fact, if they play Dan Burn in the center back role or even just keep him off the bench and play Lewis Hall in the left back position, they'll be much better off in this modern day Premier League. I think Trippier could potentially leave the club. There are rumors about that. Even if he stays, I don't think that's going to be a problem, but they have an incredible deputy in Livermento, so I don't think they will fall too much in the right back position even if Trippier leaves. I'm looking at their midfield where they kind of lost Tonali last year because of the betting scandal, and Joe Linton picked up a lot of injuries. So those would have been the two midfielders that you would have trusted to protect the defense. And they have one of the best midfielders in Bruno Guimaraes there. So midfield, they're kind of stacked. In defense, they're solid if they sign Margehi and Pope comes back. If they keep Isak and Gordon, Newcastle have one of the best overall squads in the Premier League. Now, I'm not sure they have the best depth, but just the starting 11 itself is really solid, apart from the right wing position, where I think there are a lot of question marks over players like Almiron and Murphy and players of that ilk. But they do have somebody that could be a game changer in Harvey Barnes, who could be coming off the bench in case there are any injuries. So I do feel that Newcastle have a very solid team. Finishing in 7th above Manchester United does feel right. In fact, I considered even putting them in 6th place, finishing above Aston Villa, who I'm going to be predicting to finish there. But I'm just not sure I have the ability and trust in Eddie Howe to be asking him to finish above a manager that I would trust in Unai Emery. So for now, I think a 7th place finish for Newcastle is fair. The team that I'm going to be predicting to finish in 6th place is going to be Aston Villa. Now, I really rate the manager Unai Emery, and when I'm looking at this squad in general, it is really stacked, apart from the winger position, or I'm hoping they go out into the transfer market to replace somebody like Moussa Diaby. Now, Diaby was really an X factor for them because of his partnership with Watkins, but Leon Bailey can't be slept on. He picked up 10 goals and 10 assists from only 22 starts. So if he picks up more minutes, I'm expecting him to go higher in the totem pole and become the second best player at Aston Villa. When I'm looking at the midfielders that they have, they're loaded. They've got Yuri Tillemans, McGinn. They signed Onana from Everton. They have Barkley that they signed from Luton. They have Jacob Ramsey. They also have Morgan Rogers as well, who's been the hype train in the preseason. So they've got a lot of players that they can play in different positions across the pitch, and I honestly really rate the manager. They also brought in somebody like Matson, who could be probably better than Alex Moreno in the left wing back position. I'm looking at their center back position, and they've got depth there as well. They've got Konza, they've got Pau, they've got Mings coming back from injury, they've got Diego Carlos as well. So I think they're stacked all over the pitch. I just don't really like Matty Cash. He's the only player I don't like in this squad. But apart from him, I think they're really loaded across the squad. I even like their goalie, Emi Martinez. He's incredible, one of the best shot stoppers in the league. Defensively, they're okay. They play a very high line, so I'm not sure if I would ever trust them defensively, but offensively, you can always trust Unai Emery teams to score goals, and I just really rate the manager. So backing them to finish again in the top 6 makes sense. I backed him to slightly fall off this year because they'll have to manage the Champions League as well as the Premier League, so that's why I'm not expecting them to finish in the top 4, but it wouldn't surprise me. I mean, Watkins is going to be the second or third best striker in the league, and it's kind of without question. And when you have a talent like that, you have players that can bring the best out of him, you're going to be fine as long as he stays fit. It wouldn't surprise me to see them finish in 4th or 5th. But for now, my instinct is just telling me to predict a slight drop off just based on the fact that they'll have to balance their squad in multiple competitions. Now, there are 2 teams that are going to be finishing in either 4th or 5th, and I'm not sure which way to flip it. But for now, I'm just going to be giving Spurs the edge to finish in the top 4 because of the signing of Dominic Solanke. And I think Chelsea will end up finishing in 5th place come the end of the season. Now, it wouldn't surprise me if I got this wrong, but that's just what my initial instinct is based on the preseasons and the transfer market that I've seen so far. I just think Chelsea are going to have a very slow start to the season, trying to get acclimatized to the new situations and positions that players are going to be in the system. And I feel like the opposite is going to be happening at Spurs. They understand the system and they're just plug and playing a new striker. I really just feel like under the system, they usually just create so many chances for that striker position at Spurs. And I'm just confident that Dominic Solanke will score goals in the Premier League. He has done it before. So I'm just really confident that he will bring better hold-up play, he'll bring better finishing, and he'll just play more games than Richarlison. And I think with Son not being asked to be playing in the number 9 position, he can go back into the left wing position where he's at his best, where he's one of the best finishers in world football, coming in onto the right foot, finishing into the far corner. And I just feel like he'll also score more goals from the left wing than he would, including last season where he played some of the games in the striker position, which sounds weird, but it's just true. Like, Son is just such an anomaly. We've seen it for the last 5 or 6 years, just an XG overperformer. So I think as long as he has good link up play and Solanke adjusts to the system fine, I think I would genuinely expect Spurs to improve offensively, and I think they'll improve defensively, because what happens right now is that they play one style of football, because Richarlison doesn't have the versatility like a Solanke has, where Solanke is also good in the air and Solanke can hold up the ball with his physicality better, versus like when I'm seeing them play with Richarlison, they go up the pitch and then they lose the ball quickly and then the ball just comes back against them. And so you're seeing these types of basketball matches that happen with Spurs. But I feel like they'll have better hold up play with Solanke and they'll improve defensively by signing a striker. Sounds weird, but that's just what my initial thought process is. And I do want to caveat all this information by saying that the expected data would suggest that Chelsea should be finishing above Spurs because they had better XG and they had better expected goals conceded. But I just feel like the idea of implementing a new philosophy will change the expected data. And I think the comfortability of having a Solanke that's just a plug and play option into a system that's already set is easier than having players learn a new system that Maresca is trying to teach them. Now, I do want to emphasize that Chelsea are Cole Palmer Football Club, and Palmer has been playing in the preseason. So when he comes back, I'm sure the performances from Chelsea will improve. But for now, Chelsea are kind of just all over the place in preseason. They're just conceding goals. They're yet to understand the system that Maresca is trying to implement. Somebody like Nkunku will feel like a new signing for them because he wasn't really there last year. Jackson was a very solid striker. At times he was underperforming his XG in the beginning part of the season, and then he overperformed his XG. But I think over the course of the season, I think he was slightly down on his XG, but it wasn't a massive amount that you think he's a bad striker. I think he's solid. He just finds himself always hitting the post or always just offside. Jackson is so frustrating sometimes to watch, but I think he's important in the way that he links up play. I think his link up with Palmer and Nkunku will be vital to the way that Chelsea play this season. I just have question marks defensively. An interesting thing to note is that the manager brought in somebody like Dewsbury Hall, who should be playing in the center mid position. They also have good quality players in Caicedo and Enzo Fernandez as well in the deeper lying center mid positions. And I want to mention that they have someone like Cucurella, who had an incredible performance at the Euros. They have Gusto, they have James. They brought so many different goalies. I don't know who's going to start. So I feel like they have a lot of depth overall. And I just feel like backing Chelsea to have a top 4 finish is probably the right play. But my instinct just tells me something isn't right. Now, coming into the top 3, I think third place is just very obvious. It does feel like there's the first 2 and the third place will kind of just be a slight drop below, and then there will be a large gap between like 4th, 5, and 6th to 3rd. So I feel like in third place, I'm going to be putting Arne Slot's Liverpool. It does feel like the obvious thing to say. Klopp is pound for pound one of the best managers in Premier League history, and I feel like moving away from a manager like him, there's got to be some sort of regression. Now, it wouldn't surprise me to see Liverpool finish outside the top 4 if things don't click, but from what I'm seeing in preseason, the system that they're using under Arne Slot isn't going to be as heavy metal. They're not going to be pushing forward as often. They're going to be playing with this double pivot, and I feel like it's just going to be allowing Trent to become exactly where he was in the first couple of years under Jurgen Klopp, where he's going to be one of the key cogs, I think, in the system if he plays in right back. There's going to be a new system, new tactics, but I still feel like when you have the core players of Trent, Alisson, Van Dijk, and Salah in your team, I think there's no way you can finish outside the top 4 unless there are major injuries and things start to unravel at Liverpool. But for now, it's innocent till proven guilty with that club because they've just shown this for the last 5 or 6 years that they can still compete. And people thought Van Dijk was finished and he's still one of the best center backs in the league. When you're looking at all the data, he had better data than somebody like Rudiger over the course of the season last year. So it just shows you how great Van Dijk is performing. So I think we haven't really seen Salah or Van Dijk or Alisson fall off a cliff. They're aging like fine wine is what I'm trying to say. And I just feel like Liverpool will still probably finish top 4, and I think it would be really surprising to see them fall out of it. Now, this is the big decision. It's Arsenal versus Man City for the Premier League title. Last year, I think it was a 3 or 4 point difference coming down to the final day. And I think the interesting thing to keep in mind is that Alvarez has left Man City. Now, if Man City go out there and they don't sign someone, I think I'd back Arsenal to win the league because I think they already have the best defense. They're 20 or 30% better than Man City defensively. All they'd have to do is improve their goal scoring output, and I don't think anybody can really stop them. I think the only issue for Arsenal if they don't win the league is going to be Kai Havertz. I think it's going to be his form that will dictate whether or not Arsenal win the league because I don't think they'll concede very many goals. It's just about can they score enough. And when I'm looking at Man City, I just think there are question marks. De Bruyne is kind of getting older. If Alvarez isn't replaced, then I'm not sure they have enough depth, especially if Holland picks up an injury. Who's going to be the striker? So I just feel like Foden had his breakout season, but can he continue to perform at that level? I think so. After Pep being there for multiple years, there are so much young talent that's kind of untapped. They've got Oscar Bob, who's breaking through in preseason, and they've got somebody like Jeremy Doku, who is completely untapped potential. He's got raw pace, but just lacks end product. So when things click for him, Man City will just elevate completely. And you've always got the best striker in world football. I genuinely think Holland will win the Ballon d'Or this year. I think he'll probably win the PFA Player of the Year this year. And I think Man City will win the Premier League. I think this is going to be the Holland revenge season. And there's nothing that I can tell you that says this will happen. It's just I have faith in Holland to become the best player in world football. Like I think he has all of the abilities to do that. And he put up 27 underlying XGI in the last 2 seasons. In his first season, he scored 36 goals. In his second season, he scored 27. In his career, he has shown overperformance of XG in his history. So this was like one of his first years of underperforming XG. So it's a pattern of him being incredible at finishing. So why would I back against that? I just feel like it wouldn't be surprising for him to put up 35 goals in a season again. So I just feel like it's hard to really look past that when you're looking to predict somebody to win the Premier League. And because of that, all I'm going to say is if Alvarez is replaced and they bring in someone and Pep is still there, there's no chance Arteta is going to be winning this Premier League title. Like, there's no chance. Like, it's Pep Guardiola, it's Erling Haaland. You got the best coach with the best player. I mean, there's nothing else you can say. Unless Haaland gets an injury, I really don't see Arsenal winning the Premier League title this year. But it wouldn't surprise me if Arsenal pip it on the final day. And it'll really come down to those head-to-head matches where Arsenal drew both of those games. So let's see what happens this year. But I just feel like it's going to happen again. And I'm a Liverpool fan. I've seen this. Like Liverpool have been so dominant and we didn't win enough trophies. And it's because of Pep. Like Pep is just so good at football. Like the way that his teams play are just so tactically sound. And even though Arsenal are better defensively, City are just so damn good offensively. And they have better underlying XG overperformers on offense with Foden overperforming XG, KDB and Haaland all being XG overperformers that they'll score enough goals to win games. It's just as simple as that. And it's, again, I just feel like the reason why Arsenal won't win the league is going to be because they didn't score enough goals in some of these tighter games. They probably dropped some points against Aston Villa or against a Fulham or someone where they should have beat and they didn't. And that's the reason why they didn't win the league at the end of the season. So that's my honest and humble opinion. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section down below. I know I've had some crazy hot takes, probably some super spicy takes. Sometimes I have some overcooked takes where I overthink it, but if you agree or disagree, let me know in the comment section down below. I really hope you enjoyed this video. I really liked creating it for you and I can't wait to watch it back. So thank you so much for all your support and I'll talk to you guys soon. Take care. Peace.